In 2018, France won the World Cup with one of the youngest squads in the tournament. 4 years later, they reached another final. Between those two tournaments, they kept producing players the rest of Europe could not stop buying. Mbappé, Camavinga, Tchouaméni, Saliba, Koundé, Dembélé, Maignan, Thuram. Every generation looked stronger than the last. Every transfer window, another French teenager arrived at a top club with a price tag that made other federations wonder what they were doing wrong. People called it luck. It wasn't, because 40 years ago, hidden in a forest 50 kilometers outside Paris, one academy quietly decided to industrialize greatness, and the sport has never looked the same since. But France wasn't always France. In 1976, the French national team had failed to qualify for the previous two World Cups. Not one, two, back to back. The most populous footballing nation in Western Europe, with a professional league and centuries of sporting culture, could not qualify for the biggest tournament in the world. The federation was embarrassed, the fans were exhausted, and Fernand Sastre, the president of the French Football Federation, sat down and asked a question that most football administrators never think to ask. Why does France keep running out of players? Not why did they lose a match, not who should be the next manager. Why, generation after generation, did France keep arriving at major tournaments with squads that looked good on paper and fell apart when it mattered? The answer, when Sastre finally found it, was both obvious and radical.
France wasn't developing players, it was collecting them. Every other major football nation built their identity around clubs. Clubs found talent, clubs developed talent, clubs decided what kind of football was worth playing. The national team arrived every 2 years and tried to stitch 11 different footballing philosophies into something coherent. Sastre looked at that system and decided to burn it down. France stopped asking how to win the next tournament. They started asking how to win every tournament. And that question led them 50 kilometers outside Paris, into the forests of Rambouillet, to a patch of land that would become the most important address in the history of international football. Most countries build football around clubs. France built football around a child. The idea was simple, and the execution took 12 years. Sastre brought in Stefan Kovacs, a Romanian-born manager who had won back-to-back European Cups with Ajax's total football side, and asked him to design a development system from scratch. Kovacs drew his inspiration not from Dutch football or Spanish football, but from the communist training centers of his homeland. Rigid institutions where individual skill was obsessively refined for the good of the collective, where no child was wasted because the system had made sure to find every child worth finding. Think about that for a second. The system that produced the freest, most creative generation of footballers on the planet was inspired by a communist regime. France didn't copy the ideology, they copied the discipline. And then they gave it to children who grew up on the most diverse, chaotic, creative streets in Europe. The combination produced something neither the communists nor the suburbs could have built alone. Construction began in 1982. The center opened in January 1988. 56 hectares, 66,000 square meters of turfed pitches, a medical center, a gym, a film room, 3 tennis courts, and 22 13-year-olds selected from every district of the Île-de-France region who would live there Monday to Friday and learn football the way France had decided football should be learned.
Not a style, not a system, a player. The director, Jean-Claude Lafargue, explained the philosophy with a single image. Think of a great actor, he said. A great actor does not specialize in one kind of role. A great actor can play any role the script demands, and play it brilliantly.
That is what Clairefontaine produces. Not a Clairefontaine footballer. A footballer who can play anywhere for anyone in any system at the highest level. No tiki-taka, no gegenpressing, no fixed formation. Instead, movement off the ball, weak foot training, link-up play, positional intelligence, and the psychological education to handle elite competition before a professional club had ever touched them. The rest of the world was teaching players what to play. Clairefontaine was teaching players how to think. The first generation came through slowly, then all at once. Nicolas Anelka joined Clairefontaine at 14 from the suburbs of Paris, moved to Arsenal at 16, sold for £23 million 1 year later, the most expensive teenager in the history of English football at the time. Thierry Henry, Clairefontaine graduate, became the Premier League's greatest ever striker, scored 228 goals for Arsenal, and changed the definition of what a centre-forward could be. Blaise Matuidi, Kylian Mbappé. Mbappé arrived at Clairefontaine from Bondy, an 18-kilometre drive from the Stade de France. He left for Monaco. At 18, he became one of the most expensive teenagers in history. At 19, he was a world champion. Anelka, Henry, Saha, Matuidi, Mbappé, all of them the same forest, the same pitches, the same philosophy. And those are only the graduates of the flagship academy, because here is where the story gets bigger than anyone expected. Clairefontaine was never the whole story. Most people, when they hear about French football's production line, picture one academy in one forest outside Paris. The truth is that Clairefontaine was a proof of concept that became a national architecture.
The French Federation deployed 300 technical advisors across the entire country, every region, every department, every district. Using a pyramid system, district scouts filtered to regional academies. Regional academies filtered to one of 12 national centers across France, in Marseille, Yévin, Dijon, Guadeloupe, Réunion. And the very best from those 12 filtered to Clairefontaine itself. One academy became 16. 16 became a national system. The national system became the most productive talent pipeline in the history of the sport. Pogba came through the system, Kante came through the system, Tchouaméni, Camavinga, Saliba, the generation now dismantling defenses across Europe, all of them filtered through a pyramid Fernand Sastre drew on a piece of paper in 1976. Because France had failed to qualify for 2 consecutive World Cups, and he refused to let it happen a third time. And here is the detail that should stop you completely. Some of the players France developed went on to represent other nations. Mehdi Benatia, who captained Morocco. Rafael Guerreiro, who helped beat France in the Euro 2016 final, representing Portugal. Willy Boly for the Ivory Coast. France built them, France lost them, and France kept winning anyway. The system was so productive it could afford to give talent away to rival nations and still dominate. No other country in the history of football has ever been able to say that. Today, every major football nation talks about development pathways, elite scouting, regional academies, long-term planning, technical education from childhood upward. France was doing all of it in 1988.
The German Federation visited Clairefontaine after their humiliation at Euro 2004 and came home and rebuilt German football from scratch. The result was the generation that won the 2014 World Cup. The English FA visited and built St. George's Park in 2012. Spain studied the model when designing La Masia's national integration strategy. The strangest thing about Clairefontaine's legacy is this. France built it because they were failing. They were desperate, embarrassed, out of ideas. And in that desperation, they built something so effective that nations who were beating them at the time, Germany, England, Spain, eventually had to come to France and ask how it was done. The countries that humiliated France in the 1970s spent the next 40 years quietly adopting the system France invented to stop being humiliated by them. That is not just an academy story. That is a complete reversal of the football world order, achieved not through talent alone, but through a plan that took 12 years to build and 40 years to prove right. France wasn't the first country to produce great players. It was the first to build a machine that never stopped producing them. Great teams disappear. Great players retire. Great generations eventually age out of the sport. Great systems don't. The forest is still there. The pitches are still there. The 22 13-year-olds are still arriving every year, taking their places in the same dormitories, learning football the same way Anelka learned it, the same way Henry learned it, the same way Mbappé learned it. And somewhere among them, right now, is the player the rest of the world will spend the next decade trying to stop. They just do not know his name yet. But Clairefontaine does.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, leaving a like, commenting below, and sharing it with other football fans. Thank you for watching.